He wasn't born dangerous. He was taught to be afraid. The sign on the steel gate read K9 Isolation Unit, but everyone in the department had a simpler name for what was behind it. The problem no one could fix. The air inside carried the sharp scent of disinfectant mixed with something older, something restless. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow across the concrete floor where claw marks etched silent stories into the surface. At the far end, behind reinforced bars, Rex moved like a storm trapped in a cage. Not lunging, not pacing, waiting. His amber eyes tracked every sound, every shift, every breath that didn't belong to him. Officers kept their distance, boots stopping at the yellow line painted 6 feet from the enclosure, a line no one crossed anymore. Unpredictable, they said. Too far gone, others whispered. But no one ever asked what had pushed him there. A clipboard hung nearby, papers clipped tight, stamped with a final review notice. 48 hours. That was all the time Rex had left to prove he could belong somewhere other than behind steel. Most had already made up their minds. The dog wasn't worth the risk. The dog wasn't safe. The dog wasn't salvageable. But labels are easy when you never step close enough to listen. The door at the end of the corridor opened with a soft metallic click, and a man stepped in without hurry, boots steady, breath even, presence quiet in a way that didn't challenge the air. Officer Ethan Cole, 38. Former K9 handler. A man who understood that silence could say more than commands ever could. He didn't stop at the yellow line. Didn't flinch at the sound of Rex shifting behind the bars. Instead, he stood there for a long moment, just watching. Not the teeth. Not the posture. But the pauses in between. The way Rex's ears twitched at distant echoes. The way his body tightened not at voices, but at the faint jingle of metal from a key ring. That detail lingered. Small. Almost invisible. But not to Ethan. "You're not angry," he murmured under his breath, voice low enough that it barely touched the air. "You're listening for something that hurt you." No one else spoke. No one else moved. The room held its breath as Ethan stepped closer, crossing the painted line like it meant nothing at all. Rex didn't charge. Not yet. He shifted, weight moving forward, muscles coiled not with rage, but anticipation. Fear disguised as control. Ethan saw it. Recognized it. Because he had seen it before, not just in dogs, but in men who had learned to survive by expecting the worst. The clipboard rustled softly behind him as someone adjusted their grip, ready to intervene if needed. But Ethan raised a hand slightly, not to command, not to warn, just to ask for space. Then he did something no one in that room expected. No raised voice. No tool. No force. He reached for the latch. And the quiet click of metal echoed through the corridor like a question no one was ready to answer. The latch clicks open, and for a heartbeat, nothing moves, not the air, not the men behind the line, not even the light buzzing overhead, as if the entire room is waiting to see whether this moment will break or bend, and Rex feels it first, the shift, the absence of pressure, the door no longer a barrier but an invitation, and his body tightens, muscles drawn like a wire pulled too far, eyes locked on Ethan who does not step forward. Does not reach, does not claim space that is not freely given. Instead he lowers himself slowly, one knee touching the cold concrete, then the other, until he is no longer standing over the dog but sitting within the same level, breathing steady, hands open and empty, palms resting on his thighs where they can be seen, where they do not threaten, where they do not demand, and the silence stretches, thick and heavy, broken only by the faint hum of electricity and the distant echo of a closing door somewhere down the hall. Rex shifts again, one step forward, then stops, head low, ears flicking at every small sound, the memory of metal striking, of hands moving too fast, still living somewhere deep beneath his skin. Ethan watches the hesitation, not the posture, not the teeth, but the pause, the moment where fear asks a question before instinct answers it, and he speaks, barely louder than a breath. "You do not have to decide right now." The words are not commands, they are permission, and something in that tone lands differently. It does not push, it does not corner, it simply exists, and Rex inches closer, nails tapping softly against concrete, each step measured, uncertain, as if the ground itself might betray him. The officers behind the line shift their weight, one of them grips the clipboard tighter, ready to call it off, ready to close the door, but no one interrupts, not yet. Because what is happening does not look like control, it looks like something far more fragile. Rex lowers his head slightly, nostrils flaring as he catches the scent of Ethan, not sharp, not aggressive, steady, familiar in a way that does not trigger the storm inside him. Ethan remains still, even his breathing slows, as if matching a rhythm only the dog can hear, and then it happens, not a leap, not a snap, but a quiet collapse of tension. Rex steps within arm's reach and stops, his body trembling not with rage but with the effort of holding himself together. And Ethan does not reach for his head, does not assert dominance the way others had tried. Instead, he shifts one hand slightly forward, just enough to be noticed, not enough to overwhelm, and waits. Time stretches again, seconds folding into something longer, heavier, until Rex makes the choice himself. He leans forward, just enough for his nose to brush against Ethan's fingers, a brief contact, electric in its simplicity, and then he pulls back, as if surprised by his own courage. The room exhales without realizing it, a quiet ripple of disbelief moving through the officers who have never seen the dog hesitate like this, never seen him choose stillness over reaction. Ethan lets the moment pass without praise, without sudden movement, because he understands that trust does not grow from celebration, it grows from consistency, from knowing that nothing bad follows the moment of vulnerability. And so he stays there, grounded, present, allowing Rex to circle once, twice, each step less rigid than the last, until the space between them no longer feels like a threat but something else entirely, something neither of them names yet, but both of them feel, the beginning of a bond that does not come from force, but from the simple, radical act of not hurting what is already afraid. No one speaks after that first touch, because everyone in that room understands they just witnessed something that should not have happened. Not according to the reports, not according to the warnings printed in bold ink on every page of Rex's file. And yet the dog who could not be approached without tension now stands within arm's reach of a man who has not raised his voice once. And Ethan knows better than to rush what comes next. Because trust is not built in a moment, it is revealed in the moments that follow, the ones where nothing bad happens when it could have. He shifts slightly, slow enough that it feels like part of the same stillness. And Rex notices, his body tightening for a fraction of a second, not in aggression, but in memory, like something inside him expects the world to change shape without warning. Ethan pauses immediately, letting the movement dissolve, letting the air settle again. "You are okay," he says quietly, not as reassurance, but as truth, and Rex blinks. A small thing, almost invisible, but different from before, less sharp, less guarded. And then he circles once more, closer this time, brushing past Ethan's knee without contact, testing the boundary, testing the absence of consequence. The officers behind the line exchange glances, not of fear now, but of confusion, because everything they were taught says control comes from command, from structure, from pressure, and yet here, in this quiet space, none of that is being used, and something is working, something deeper, something harder to define. Ethan lowers one hand just an inch further, fingers relaxed, not reaching, simply present, and after a long moment, Rex steps in again, slower this time, more deliberate, his nose touching the back of Ethan's hand, staying there just a second longer than before, long enough for warmth to register, for a scent to settle, for something unfamiliar to become familiar. And Ethan does not react, not with excitement, not with sudden praise. He lets the moment breathe. Because he knows that what the dog needs is not celebration, it is safety that does not disappear, and in that stillness, Rex exhales, a soft sound, almost like a sigh, the kind of release that does not come from obedience, but from the absence of fear. And Ethan sees it, feels it, the shift that cannot be forced, the kind that only happens when something inside chooses to let go, just a little, just enough. Minutes pass like this, quiet, steady, the world outside the enclosure fading into something distant. Until finally, Ethan moves again, slow, careful, lifting his hand slightly, giving Rex the chance to step away if he needs to. But the dog does not retreat, he stays, watching, waiting, and then Ethan does something even the most experienced handler would hesitate to do. He turns his body slightly, exposing his side, breaking the direct line, removing even the smallest hint of confrontation, and Rex responds, stepping closer, his shoulder brushing lightly against Ethan's arm. Not a push. Not a test, but something softer, something almost like acceptance. The room behind them feels different now, quieter, heavier, as if everyone is realizing they have been looking at the wrong story all along. This was never about a dangerous dog, it was about a broken pattern waiting for someone patient enough to see it, and as Ethan finally rises, slowly, giving Rex space to adjust, the dog does not lunge, does not retreat, he simply stands there, watching, steady, present. As if for the first time in a long time, he is not preparing for something to go wrong, but waiting to see what might go right. The room does not erupt in applause, it does not shift into relief, it simply holds the moment like something fragile that could still break if handled too quickly, and Ethan steps back one pace, slow and deliberate, giving Rex the space to choose again, because that is what this has always been about, not control, not dominance, but choice, and Rex does not retreat into the corner like before. He does not return to the restless pacing that once defined him, instead he remains where he is. Weight evenly balanced, eyes following Ethan not with suspicion, but with something quieter, something that feels like attention without fear, and that difference is everything. One of the officers near the back exhales softly, almost under his breath. I have never seen him like that. But Ethan does not respond, his focus still on the dog, reading every shift, every blink, every subtle change that others might miss, because he knows this is only the beginning, the first crack in a wall built over months, maybe years. And walls like that do not fall all at once, they loosen, piece by piece, through consistency, through patience, through the absence of harm. A handler near the door adjusts his stance, clearly uneasy. What is the next step? He asks quietly, and Ethan finally turns his head just enough to answer, his voice calm, grounded. We slow everything down, he says. No sudden movements, no raised voices, no pressure he did not ask for. The words are simple, but they carry weight, because they challenge everything the room has relied on until now. Rex shifts again, stepping closer to the open doorway, the threshold that once separated him from everything beyond, and for a moment he pauses there, one paw just inside, one still on the concrete of the enclosure, caught between what was and what could be. Ethan notices immediately, and he does not call him forward, does not lure him with commands or rewards, he simply steps to the side, creating a path, removing himself as an obstacle, and waits. Seconds pass, quiet and stretched. Until Rex makes the decision himself, he steps fully out of the enclosure, slow, careful, as if testing whether the world outside will hold steady this time. The officers straighten, instinct pulling them into alertness, but no one moves too quickly, not after what they have just seen. Ethan walks a few feet ahead, not looking back right away, trusting that Rex will follow if he chooses to, and after a brief hesitation, the soft sound of nails on concrete echoes behind him, measured, steady, not frantic, not forced. Rex follows. Not because he was told to, but because something inside him is no longer pushing him away from the unknown, and as they move down the corridor, the fluorescent lights no longer feel as harsh, the space no longer as confined, and Ethan glances back just once, meeting Rex's gaze for a brief second, not as handler and dog, not yet, but as two beings learning the same lesson from opposite sides, that safety is not something you demand, it is something you prove, again and again, until even the most guarded heart begins to believe it might be real. The hallway feels longer than it did before, not because the distance has changed, but because every step now carries weight, meaning, consequence, and Ethan keeps his pace slow, measured, not too far ahead, not too close, allowing Rex to decide the space between them, because distance, he knows, is a language too, one the dog understands better than any command, and behind them, the quiet follows, a silence filled with eyes watching, learning, unlearning, the kind of silence that comes when something familiar no longer fits. Rex's paws tap lightly against the concrete, steady now, not rushed, not erratic, each step a question answered by the one before it, and when they reach the wider training room, the air shifts again. Open space, higher ceiling, the faint scent of rubber mats and worn leather drifting through. Ethan stops near the center, not turning immediately, giving Rex time to take it in. The lights above hum softly. Less harsh here, more forgiving, and Rex slows. Scanning, ears flicking, body alert but not coiled, not ready to spring away, just aware, present. Ethan finally turns, not directly facing him, but at an angle, softening the line, reducing the pressure, and he lowers his hand again, the same quiet gesture, the same open invitation, consistent, predictable, and Rex notices, because consistency is what begins to rewrite memory. He steps closer. More certain this time, less hesitation in the movement, his nose brushing Ethan's hand without pulling away as quickly, staying, lingering, as if learning the shape of something safe. Ethan's voice comes again, low, steady. Good. Not praise, not excitement, just acknowledgement, and Rex's tail shifts slightly, not a full wag, not yet, but a movement that was not there before, a small signal, easy to miss if you are not looking for it. One of the officers steps into the room slowly, careful, respectful of the fragile progress, but the moment his boot scuffs against the floor, a sharp, dry sound, Rex's body tightens instantly, ears snapping back, muscles drawing in, not explosive, but defensive, the old pattern knocking at the door again. Ethan does not move toward him, does not correct, does not raise his voice, he simply lowers his own energy, grounding himself, breathing slow. It is all right, he says, the same tone, the same rhythm, offering stability instead of reaction, and the tension holds for a second, maybe two, before Rex's body softens again, not completely, but enough to stay, enough to not retreat into the storm that once took over so easily. And Ethan glances briefly at the officer, a silent request, slow down, be smaller, and the man nods, stepping back, reducing his presence, and that, more than anything, becomes the next lesson, not just for Rex, but for everyone watching. That this is not about forcing change, it is about creating space where change can happen on its own. Ethan takes a few steps toward a low training platform, nothing intimidating, just a raised surface about a foot off the ground, and he rests his hand on it, not calling Rex up, not guiding him, just showing it exists. Rex watches, head tilting slightly, curiosity beginning to replace caution, a shift so subtle it almost feels like a whisper, and after a moment, he steps forward, placing one paw on the edge. Then pulling it back, testing, uncertain. Ethan remains still, patient, allowing the hesitation to resolve naturally, and on the second try, Rex places both front paws on the platform, holding there, balanced, unsure, but willing, and Ethan nods once, quiet approval. That is it, he says, and for the first time, the room does not feel like a place of containment. It feels like the beginning of something being rebuilt, not through control, but through trust that is earned one small, steady moment at a time. By the time Rex steadies himself on the low platform, something in the room has already shifted beyond training, beyond protocol, into a quieter territory where small decisions begin to matter more than commands, and Ethan does not rush to the next step. He lets the moment settle, lets the dog feel what it means to stand without being corrected, without being pulled, without being told he is wrong for simply existing in that space, and Rex holds his position, front paws firm, back legs grounded, eyes flicking between Ethan and the open room as if mapping out every possible outcome, but none of them arrive the way they used to, none of them carry that sharp edge of threat, because nothing bad follows. Not this time, and Ethan takes a slow step to the side, just enough to change the angle, to show movement without pressure, and Rex watches, head tilting slightly, curiosity beginning to take root where fear once lived, the kind of curiosity that does not come from excitement, but from cautious hope, and that is harder to build than any obedience. One of the overhead lights hums louder for a second, flickering faintly, and Rex's ears twitch, his body tightening just a fraction. A ripple of old memory brushing against the present, but this time, he does not retreat, he does not abandon the platform, he holds, breathing through it, and Ethan notices. That is new, he murmurs, not to the room, not even fully to the dog, but as an acknowledgement of progress that cannot be measured on paper, only felt in moments like this, Behind them, the officers remain still, more aware now of their own movements, their own presence, as if learning alongside Rex that control is not something you impose, it is something you earn by becoming predictable, by becoming safe. Ethan lowers himself again, not fully seated this time, just enough to bring his center closer to Rex's level, and he extends his hand once more, consistent, patient, the same quiet invitation that started all of this, and Rex responds faster now, stepping down from the platform without hesitation, closing the distance with a steadier rhythm, his nose pressing gently into Ethan's palm, staying there. Not pulling away, not flinching, just resting for a moment that feels longer than it is, and Ethan lets his fingers move slightly, not gripping, not controlling, just a soft touch along the side of Rex's muzzle, a gesture so light it could be mistaken for air, and yet it carries meaning. Because this is the first time contact is not followed by tension, not followed by expectation of harm, and Rex exhales again, deeper this time, his body lowering just a fraction, the smallest sign of release, and Ethan withdraws his hand slowly, ending the moment before it can become overwhelming, because restraint is part of trust too, knowing when to stop, knowing when enough is enough. He stands again, calm, grounded, and takes a few steps backward, giving Rex the option to follow or stay. And without hesitation, the dog steps forward, matching him, not because he was told, but because something inside him is beginning to align with the presence in front of him, and as they move together across the room, not in perfect form, not in trained precision, but in something more honest, more real, the line between handler and dog begins to blur into something else entirely, something built not on authority, but on understanding, and for the first time since anyone can remember, Rex is not reacting to the world, he is moving within it, steady, aware, and choosing to stay. The rhythm between them begins to settle into something almost unspoken, a quiet agreement carried in movement rather than command, and Ethan slows his steps again, not to test Rex, but to observe what happens when the pace changes without warning, because real trust is revealed in the unexpected, not the rehearsed, and Rex notices immediately, his stride shortening, his body adjusting without tension, without the sharp correction that once followed any shift in expectation, and that alone tells Ethan more than any formal evaluation ever could. "You are starting to listen differently," he murmurs, voice low, steady, not meant as instruction but recognition, and Rex's ears flick toward him, not in alert defense, but in attention that feels grounded, connected, and for a moment, the training room no longer feels like a place of assessment, it feels like a space where something is being rewritten at its core. One of the officers steps forward again, slower this time, more aware of the invisible boundaries that now exist, and he carries a simple object in his hand, a leash, nothing aggressive, nothing heavy, just a standard line used in every K-9 program, but in this moment, it carries history, memory, association, and as soon as the faint sound of the clasp shifts against the metal ring, Rex's body reacts, not explosively, but noticeably, his posture tightening, head lowering slightly, eyes sharpening as if bracing for something that used to follow that sound, and Ethan sees it instantly. The past trying to re-enter through a familiar door, and he does not ignore it, does not push through it, he simply steps closer to Rex, not invading, just aligning, offering presence as an anchor. "We go slow," he says quietly, more to the room than the dog, and the officer pauses, understanding now that even the smallest detail matters, that healing is not about proving strength, but respecting what was once broken. Ethan lowers himself again, bringing his hand near Rex's shoulder, not touching, just close enough to remind him of what has already been proven safe, and Rex's breathing steadies, not immediately, but gradually, like a tide pulling back after pressing too far onto shore. The tension does not disappear, but it softens, enough to hold, enough to stay, and Ethan nods once, signaling for the leash to be placed on the ground instead of being brought forward, changing the script, removing the pressure, letting the object exist without force, and the officer complies, setting it gently a few feet away, where it rests quietly against the mat, no longer a threat, just an object waiting for meaning. Rex watches it, head tilted slightly, curiosity and caution sharing the same space, and after a moment he takes a step toward it, slow, deliberate, testing not just the object, but the absence of consequence that follows. Ethan does not move, does not guide, does not interfere, because this moment belongs to the dog, and Rex lowers his head, sniffing the leash, pausing. Listening for something that is not there, no sudden pull, no sharp correction, no raised voice, just silence, steady and patient, and that silence becomes the answer. He nudges the leash lightly with his nose, then looks back at Ethan, not for instruction, but for confirmation, and Ethan meets his gaze with the same calm presence. "It is just a tool," he says softly. "It does not decide who you are." And something in that tone settles deeper than any command ever could, because for the first time, the leash is not a symbol of control, it is simply part of a new story being written, one where Rex is not forced into place, but invited to understand it, and as he steps back from the leash, no longer rigid, no longer braced against it, the room feels the shift again, subtle but undeniable. A dog once defined by reaction now choosing response, one moment at a time, guided not by fear, but by the steady presence of someone who refuses to meet pain with pressure, and instead meets it with patience strong enough to change what everyone thought could never be changed. The leash remains on the ground, quiet now, no longer carrying the weight it once did, and Ethan does not move to pick it up, not yet, because he understands that timing is not measured in minutes or orders, it is measured in moments when fear loosens its grip just enough to allow something new to take root, and Rex stands there, watching, the muscles along his back no longer drawn tight, his breathing steady, his gaze shifting between the leash and the man who has not once forced him toward it, and that difference lingers, shaping the space in a way no command ever could. Ethan steps back again, slow, deliberate, creating distance instead of closing it, and in doing so, he offers Rex something rare, the freedom to decide without pressure, and for a second, nothing happens, the room holds still, the faint hum of the lights overhead filling the silence like a soft current, until Rex takes a step forward, then another. Not toward Ethan this time, but toward the leash, his head lowering, nose brushing against the fabric, inhaling, testing, searching for the familiar trace of tension that once followed it, but it does not come, there is no sudden pull, no tightening grip, no sharp shift in the air, just stillness, steady and unbroken. And that absence begins to rewrite something deeper than behavior, it begins to rewrite expectation. Rex nudges the leash again, a little firmer this time, then steps back, glancing toward Ethan, not for direction, but for reassurance that this new version of the world will hold, and Ethan gives it to him without words, his posture calm, his presence grounded, the same quiet anchor he has been from the beginning, and slowly, almost carefully, Rex reaches down once more and lifts the edge of the leash with his mouth, not clamped, not rigid. Just holding it for a brief second before letting it fall again, as if testing whether even that small action will change the outcome. But nothing changes, the room does not react, no one rushes in, no correction follows, and that is when something shifts fully, something subtle but irreversible. Rex steps over the leash, no longer avoiding it, no longer bracing against it, simply moving past it as part of the environment, and Ethan sees it, feels it, the line between past and present thinning just enough to let something new through. "That is it," he says quietly, his voice carrying a warmth that had not been there before, not excitement, but belief, and behind them, the officers exchange glances again, but this time there is no confusion, no uncertainty, only a growing understanding that what they are witnessing is not obedience being forced into place, but trust unfolding in real time, one choice at a time. Ethan takes a step closer now, measured, careful, and this time when he reaches toward Rex, the dog does not hesitate. Does not pull away, he leans slightly into the touch, just enough for the contact to exist without tension, and Ethan's hand rests briefly along the side of his neck, light, steady, then withdraws before it becomes too much, because even now, he knows the boundary must be respected, must remain clear and consistent, and Rex stays, not retreating, not bracing, simply present, his posture softer than it has ever been in this room, and for a moment, everything feels different, the space, the air, the quiet understanding shared between them, and then Ethan reaches down, slowly, deliberately, and lifts the leash from the ground, not with authority, not with control, But with the same calm presence he has carried through every step of this process, he holds it loosely in his hand, not attaching it, not using it, just letting it exist between them, and Rex watches, head tilted slightly, ears forward, no longer reacting to the object itself, but observing the intention behind it, and that is where the real change lies, not in the leash, not in the command, but in the meaning attached to both. And as Ethan lowers the leash back down again without using it, as if to say it no longer defines the moment, Rex does not flinch, does not brace, he simply stands there. Steady, grounded, choosing to remain, and in that choice, something quiet and profound settles into place, not a victory, not an ending, but the beginning of a new understanding, one where fear no longer leads, and trust, fragile as it is, begins to take its first real steps forward. The leash rests back on the ground, untouched, and for a long moment no one moves, as if the room itself understands that something more important than training has just taken place, something that cannot be written into manuals or measured by checklists, and Ethan remains where he is, calm, steady, letting the silence settle like dust after a storm, because he knows that what Rex needs now is not the next command, but the continuation of what has already been proven, that nothing good disappears the moment it appears, that safety does not vanish without warning, and Rex stands beside him, not perfectly still, not rigid, but present in a way he has never been before, his posture softer, his breathing even, his eyes no longer scanning for danger but resting, observing, choosing to remain in a space that once felt impossible to trust. One of the officers shifts quietly near the doorway. And this time Rex does not tighten, does not brace, he notices, yes, but the reaction stops. There, it does not escalate, it does not spiral, and Ethan sees that too, the difference between awareness and fear, between reaction and choice, and he nods slightly, almost to himself, as if acknowledging a truth that has been waiting beneath the surface all along. "You were never the problem," he says under his breath, the words not meant for the room, but for the dog who had been labeled long before anyone listened. And Rex's ears flick toward him, catching the tone if not the meaning, and in that small exchange something deeper settles, something that feels less like training and more like understanding. Ethan takes a slow step forward, then another, not to lead, not to direct, just to move, and Rex follows without hesitation, his stride steady, aligned, not because he was told to, but because he chooses to stay close to the presence that has not failed him, and as they walk together across the room, past the platform, past the place where the leash once carried weight, the space behind them feels different now, lighter, as if something has been released, not just from Rex, but from everyone watching, the expectation of failure, the assumption of danger, all of it beginning to loosen its hold, and when Ethan stops near the far wall, where a narrow window lets in a thin strip of afternoon light, he turns slightly, allowing Rex to stand beside him, shoulder to knee, not in a formal position, not in perfect alignment, but in something more honest, more real, the kind of closeness that cannot be forced, only earned, and for a moment neither of them moves, the light catching the edges of Rex's coat, revealing the subtle rise and fall of his breathing, the quiet steadiness that now defines him, and Ethan reaches down once more, slow, deliberate, his hand resting gently along the side of Rex's neck, not gripping, not guiding, just present, and this time Rex leans into it without hesitation, the contact no longer a question, but an answer, and Ethan allows himself the smallest exhale, a release of something he had held carefully until now, because he understands what this moment means, not just for the dog, but for what comes next, the decision that will follow, the one that will determine whether Rex remains a problem to be managed or becomes something else entirely, something worthy of trust. And behind them, the officers are no longer standing at a distance, no longer holding themselves back with uncertainty, they have stepped closer, not crowding, not overwhelming, but present in a new way, watching not with doubt, but with respect, and one of them speaks softly, almost hesitant. "What happens now?" And Ethan does not answer right away, because the answer is not simple, it is not immediate, it is something that will unfold over time, built in moments like this, repeated again and again until they become the new pattern, the new expectation, and finally he looks down at Rex, meeting his gaze, calm, steady. "Now we keep going," he says quietly, and Rex holds that gaze for a second longer than before, not searching, not questioning, just present, as if for the first time he understands that he is not being asked to prove himself, he is being given the chance to become something he was always capable of being, and as they stand there in the fading light, the room no longer feels like a place of judgment, but a place where something broken has begun to mend, not through force, not through fear, but through the quiet, persistent choice to believe that even the most guarded soul can change when it is finally met with patience strong enough to hold it.